Slaughterbound are among the most venerated champions of the World Eaters, rising above their kin to stand as paragons of the Blood God. Each of these warriors has welcomed one of Khorne's most ferocious demons into their souls, embracing a life of constant internal battle and unrivaled power. Bearing little resemblance to their loyalist cousins, these warriors are swollen with demonic power, their limbs transfigured into horrific weapons. Each is an army unto themselves, and today we will examine how you can make your very own custom Slaughterbound. Hello everyone, and welcome back to The Red Path. My name is Dara, and you are watching the Crimson Canvas, our video series dedicated solely to hobbying and painting World Eaters. Today, I've got another kitbash and conversion tutorial for you, and we're going to be working on the Slaughterbound. This model has just been revealed by Games Workshop, and while its reception has been lukewarm at best, I think the idea of the Slaughterbound presents a brilliant canvas for customization and creative expression. I'm going to give you a quick overview of an easy process for creating a custom Slaughterbound with lots of options for making them unique. But I've also got a fun twist in this video. When I was thinking about how I was going to make the tutorial, I quickly came to the conclusion that I wanted two main things from this video. Number one, I wanted it to be quick, easy, and accessible. Number two, I wanted it to be economical, so you could get the most value for money out of the build. While I was thinking about which kits to use for this, it occurred to me that if I found a way to combine the Possessed and Eightbound kits, I would have a total of 8 models. Obviously, this is a great number, but it means that if I could manage to work the kits correctly, I would be able to make 2 Slaughterbound and 6 Eightbound, effectively getting me 4 units for the price of 2 boxes. So not only will this video give you a full run through of how to create a custom Slaughterbound, but you'll also be able to build a full squad of Eightbound with similar visual cues to follow your mighty champion. And before we start cutting things up, I do want to give you a quick heads up about the tutorial. There are some optional steps ahead, which I've included in the video as an example of how you can push the build further, but you don't have to do them if they seem too daunting. You'll easily be able to bash these kits without cracking out the green stuff, so don't worry. And if you're enjoying this hobby content and want to improve your own hobby and get focused feedback from myself, then consider signing up to our Patreon. At the Berserker tier, you can get access to a private channel in our Discord, full of like-minded hobbyists, and you'll get constant feedback and advice from myself, as well as sneak peeks of upcoming tutorials and written PDFs of painting guides. Anyway, that's enough preamble. Grab yourselves a brew, and let's get into the build. The first part of this build is pretty straightforward. We're basically going to completely disregard the kit instructions and snip out all the torsos and legs from both kits. It's a good idea to keep matching pieces together at this stage, but otherwise we don't have to be very careful. Once you have all the Eightbound and Possessed torsos laid out, we can get to something a little bit spicy. And this is partially optional, but I do recommend you follow this as close as possible. We're effectively going to give ourselves the maximum amount of posability for the miniatures by cutting them into sections that can be interchanged at will. This involves sawing off the upper torso from the legs, and in the case of the Possessed kit, also sawing off any arms which come pre-molded to the torsos. For this, I'm using my trusty hobby saw. This thing is a must-have for anyone who wants to dig into conversions and kit bashes, and it's very cheap. So if you don't have one, add it to your shopping list. It might seem daunting to take a saw to really nice models like these, but trust me, it's all part of the plan. It will allow us to easily swap Eightbound and Possessed legs and torsos, as well as changing which mutated limbs are attached to who. The key here is to cut as close to the waistline as possible, and try to avoid cutting into any visually important pieces at any point. And if you're too nervous to split the legs and torsos, don't worry, you can skip this step, but I do recommend cutting off the arms on the Possessed, which is much easier to do. When we're all finished with this step, you're going to have a lot of bits in front of you. It's a good idea to group these by kit at this point, keeping the Possessed to one side and Eightbound to the other. It's also a good idea to further group them into torsos, legs, and arms to help keep track of everything. Once you've got it all together, you'll need to do some gluing. Here I'm simply pairing the front and back of any torsos or legs together. Certain elements like these can't be easily converted, so it's better just to keep them all in one piece. Once you have all that prepared, your basic bodies are pretty much ready, so we can move on to the fun stuff. It's time now to do our test fitting. This is probably my favorite part of any conversion, as it's where the miniature starts to come to life. For this, I've snipped out all the 8-bounds and possessed arms still on the sprue and gathered them into a big pile. Using some blue tack, I'm simply going to mess around with a bunch of different possibilities until something jumps out at me. I do the same with the torso and leg combos here, trying to find poses that work well together. This part is a lot of fun because you can get really creative and essentially imagine completely unique miniatures. You'll more than likely accidentally discover something which immediately looks awesome to you, while other poses might take a little bit more work to get correct. This is where your unique angle is going to show itself. What speaks to you? Do you like a very dynamic action stance, or something more subtle and slow? Because you're using tack to try things out, nothing is set in stone, and you should take your time to go through all the available options. While one weapon arm might seem cool, there could be something else in the bits pile which is even better. To give you some advice before we move on to the next step, the best way to create a good, visually powerful pose is to follow certain laws and bodily limits, even though these are possessed superhuman warriors. First, and one of the most important things to keep in mind, if a model is running or walking, remember that they have to balance. By this, I mean think about how a person walks. If their right leg goes forward, their left hand also goes forward. The forward arm should always be the opposite side to the forward leg, otherwise the model looks unbalanced. Second, think about posture. If a model's knees are bent somewhat, it's a good idea to slightly hunch their pose, while if they're extended out, you can make them standing tall. Follow the motion of the figure and determine how much you want to twist the torso as well. Try and visualize the movement they're making and ask yourself how would the upper body move to convey that. And if you're struggling with this part, use reference poses or images online to help out. And at this point, it's a good idea to also start deciding which of these models is going to be the Slaughterbound. I had 3 options in mind here, with 2 of them being the more mutated Marines that stood a bit taller. I eventually started leaning towards these since I figured possession by a bloodthirster is going to have a fairly substantial visual impact, and I decided that the third option would probably end up as the 8-bound champion instead. At the end of the test fitting, I always lay everything out and give it a little bit of time to rest before I fully commit to the build. Usually this means leaving them at least until the following day, revisiting them over the evening, and making sure I'm happy with all the ideas that I've come up with. Sometimes I find myself making changes, even though I was fully sure that I was perfectly happy with the miniature when I tacked it together. For my 2 Slaughterbound candidates, I wanted to swap the heads to make them even more menacing. This part is, of course, entirely optional, and was actually kind of a pain in the ass, to be totally honest. I also broke my own rule here of using just only 2 kits and subbed in 2 heads from the Varangard that I had lying around. I'm sorry guys, I just couldn't resist adding them as I felt they really captured the Slaughterbound vibe quite well. This part did involve sawing off the back of the head so it could slot into the 8-bound neck section, which was really annoying to do, but ultimately I was very pleased with how they turned out. The next part of the build is arguably the hardest of the entire process, but it's not really necessary unless you want to accentuate the build and take it to the next level. Trigger warning, this does actually involve green stuff. If you did the initial torso cuts and separated the leg sections, you'll probably find that you need to do some basic gap filling regardless with green stuff, so you don't want to mess with it at all. Make sure you leave the torsos attached to the legs in the beginning. If, however, you want to level things up and make these miniatures really stand out, here's the process. I initially did this by creating a thick sausage of green stuff, placing it on the legs, and then pressing the torso down to allow the green stuff to become the rough shape of the abdomen. This allows you to mess with the posture a little bit too, and I had some fun making one of the Slaughterbound quite hunched over. When I first did this, I started sculpting the details of the abdomen straight away on the sausage, but I found that this wasn't very effective as it was moving around the contact points between the legs and upper body way too much. So after suffering with one model like this, I let the green stuff cure overnight and came back the next day once everything had dried. I then added a fresh, thin layer of green stuff over the initial sausage and sculpted the details on that. Now, before you start commenting down below, yes, I am very aware that I am no master sculptor. In fact, I usually hate working with green stuff. It's a really challenging medium to learn, but thankfully, I got some great advice from Anfarius when I was at No Retreat about green stuff, and he broke down a lot of my fears about this medium. I contemplated actually not putting this part in the video at all, but I figured it would be good to show you folks something that I'm still working on improving and not very good at. No matter what stage of hobbying we're at, there's always something new that we can and should be learning. At the minute, I'm focusing on my sculpting ability, and this is a fun little milestone for me since I've never really shown it off before. There is some really important tips for working with green stuff if you're just starting out too. Always keep it moist, either with water or Vaseline, and try to keep your fingers and tools moist as well. For the tools, everyone likes to work with something different, but I use a dental tool, again recommended by Anfarius for this purpose. It's a very precise instrument that allows a lot of different types of manipulation. And like any type of sculpting, green stuff is more about taking things away rather than adding things in. As you remove more of the putty, you can sculpt in the details as you want them. I had a drawing mannequin to hand so I could reference the abdominal muscles, and it's always a good idea to have something nearby which gives you a reference for whatever you're doing. In the end, while the result is nothing special, it was good enough for me to be happy with. And yes, along the way, I did question why I was spending hours and hours sculpting a bare abdomen on a small plastic toy soldier, but here we are. When it comes to gluing in the arms, you'll probably find that not every joint fits flush due to the different shoulder joints between the 8-bound and the Possessed kit. You can overcome this the World Eater's way, with a bit of strong arming and force manipulation, but it's a lot easier if you make a tiny ball of green stuff and prep each part with a little bit of plastic glue. When you push the arm onto the torso, some green stuff will spill over, but we can clean that up very shortly. The result is a firm and secure joint with a surprising amount of maneuverability, meaning you're also not locked into a specific position for the arm. I worked through this for all the models that needed it, and once it was done, went back to the start and smoothed out the green stuff overspill. In some places I blended this into the muscle of the arm, while in others I just cut away the excess. And it's actually a very simple step and a good way to start to get to know green stuff if you're unfamiliar with it. Moving on to the head selection, one of the most important parts of the kitbash. Thankfully, I already had my 2 Slaughterbound heads, but picking the right head is a difficult task. It's the first place someone will look when examining a mini, so you really want it to suit the model. I'm a huge fan of the Possessed heads in the kit, and I use plenty of them here, but I also sprinkled in a couple of Berserker heads as well, just to make sure the Legion was represented and obvious. Similarly for the shoulder pads, I mixed and matched where possible, picking shoulders that suited specific poses and vibes. It is worth noting that some of the Possessed shoulders don't join very well, so I had to leave them out. And you'll have to trim the little nubbin inside the 8-bound shoulder pads to make sure they can fit on all the Possessed shoulders as well if you want to interchange them. There's no right or wrong way to go about this. I mean, I took some Berserker shoulder pads for certain parts as well. You could take Terminator pads or whatever you fancy. Just pick something that looks good to you and don't worry about it. Usually, at this stage, the miniature is 90% done, and all that remains is to add finishing touches and small details. In this case, I chose to selectively add some fine jewelry chain to a few of the models. mainly to cover some of the weaker sculpting on the torsos and add a little bit of story across the miniatures. Chains are so world eaters after all. Usually I'd add some skulls, symbols, tokens, and the like, but honestly, as it is, these minis are pretty busy, and I didn't want to risk overcrowding them. So now, all that's left is to slap on some power packs and get these guys in the photo booth. And with that, I think we can call the build done. Using just 2 kits from Games Workshop and a few spares lying around, I've managed to get 4 menacing units for my World Eaters. I'm particularly happy with how the 2 Slaughterbound came out. They stand above the 8-bound and have a certain extra oomph, marking them as leaders, but not being entirely detached either. In my opinion, while the final result could certainly be pushed harder using a multitude of different kits, this is a good way of making unique models and saving money at the same time. By pushing yourself creatively, you'll often find new ways of going about things, and I really enjoyed setting myself the challenge of having a limited number of kits to work with and making things as simple as possible. Overall, I hope you enjoyed the process and maybe found it inspiring too. If you didn't already know, we're running a community event at the minute in the Red Path Discord, which is all about converting and building your own Slaughterbound. So why not hop in there and take part? I'd love to see what you come up with and your own takes on this build. As always, if you have enjoyed the video and want to see more, please leave a like or comment below. It helps us out a lot, and if you're not already subscribed, why not hop in and join the action? If you want to support us further, the best way is through Patreon. Berserker tier patrons get access to a private channel within the Discord focused on either hobby or competitive play, where you can find like-minded folks and constant feedback from myself and the guys. You'll also get sneak peeks at upcoming projects and full written PDFs for any painting tutorials I do on the Crimson Canvas. For now though, I think it's about time we wrap this one up. Thanks for watching folks, and until the next one, stay healthy, stay safe, and kill, maim, burn.